Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Let's talk about math and Dragon Ball Daima. So here's how the video is going to go. I'm going to talk about Dragon Ball Daima. I'm going to talk about how math is used along the way, and I'm going to talk about how I feel about Daima. Um, to give you an idea, just to start, I don't know how I feel about Dragon Ball Daima actually. Do I think it was bad? Oh, sorry, do I think it was bad? No, I do not. Do I think it was good? I don't know. Did I like it? I don't know. Did I enjoy it? Enough. And sometimes a lot. Um, so yeah, we're gonna figure out things together with my feelings with Dragon Ball Daima, which I'm still processing. Okay, so you're free to assume all spoilers for not only Dragon Ball Daima, but Dragon Ball GT, Dragon Ball Z, all the things Dragon Ball, whether we're talking about the anime, the manga, or gaming. Just assume that anything up for grabs with Dragon Ball. I'm sorry, anything in Dragon Ball is up for grabs. Just assume the spoilers to be safe. Okay? So, if you're good, let's get into it. And again, spoilers ahead. So, with Dragon Ball Daima, it's an interesting beast. It is a Dragon Ball anime that is online only. It ran for 20 episodes, and it just ended at the time of the recording. Like, it's super, super close still, right? It came out October 2024, lasted up until like February 2025. I guess like the dub is still going, I guess, but like the original is done, right? So all the episodes are out there for the sub, right? And I have thoughts. I have thoughts. I have some good thoughts. I have some bad thoughts, and I just have some thoughts. I don't know how to feel about Dragon Ball Daima. Like I said, we're gonna figure it out together. But let's talk about some of the math first, okay? Okay, so when it comes to Dragon Ball Daima, there's math all across the board, both in universe and on a meta level. But we'll talk about the in universe stuff and kind of go from there. And some things might come in and out of this conversation. So when it comes to Dragon Ball Daima, right? Yes, there's a lot of adventure, but let's be honest, there's a lot of fighting, and there's a lot of math in that fighting, and a lot of math in that adventure, right? And if we focus on the fighting to begin with, it's something that's inherently mathematical, right? Like you have these characters, and they're trying to dish out damage while trying to avoid taking it. They are, managing their strength and their speed and their ki while also registering their movements and their opponent's movements and anticipating actions along the way. And so, it ends up being this wild thing where there's never a point where they're not using math because, like, math is everywhere and everything. But, like, in a very, very direct way, they're making these quick calculations and they're doing this quick thinking to engage in combat, and I dig that. And then you have this idea that characters can fly around, so it's just this added layer to it. And so there's math in the distance, math in the speed, math in the time, math in it all. And so I dig it. I dig it hard. It's just yeah. And then of course there's math in like the choreography and how it's coming to us, right? Because like in universe, these characters are looking at each other and they're doing this action or that or that action, but on meta level that's all been designed, so it's cool to like see how that all pans out. And with that in mind, right, like there's also like math in the adventuring, right? Like it's like, oh well, we have to take stock of this environment, we gotta look around, we gotta like break through this uh obstacle or that obstacle, and they're looking for the Dragon Balls, and there's math on those Dragon Balls, right? Like in this case, right, we're focused on the Dragon Balls in the demon world, and there are three Dragon Balls in said demon world, and you can pretty much grant any wish, right? But the thing is, so you have these three characters, sorry, three Dragon Balls that can grant this one wish. And then, like, as far as I could tell, like, I can't remember any restrictions on said wish. But so how do you get them right? One, you have to track them down, and they're in each of the kind of tiers of the demon world, because there's like three tiers of that demon realm. Yeah, I meant to say like the demon realm, right? And each of those like tiers has their own planets and all that stuff, and there's a Dragon Ball in each of those tiers. And so you have to navigate all of that But you also have to fight the Tamagami, right? They're super strong warriors that you have to beat in order to obtain the Dragon Ball. So, there's having the fights that you have with them. And if you're actually able to overcome them physically, you still have to do an additional challenge because, they're sneaky like that. And with those challenges, like the ones that we see in this series, are kind of funny, and they get at math in some pretty direct ways. Like one of them is a whole ball in a cup situation. Like things are they're moving around. It's like, oh, well, which cup is the ball under, or whatever. In this case, the Dragon Ball. And so you have to observe, and there's math and all that, and how it works. And then one of the challenges is an arithmetic problem. And it's like, hey, we're gonna throw some numbers at you. You have to like look at those numbers, and they're gonna come at you quickly, and you have to add them all up. And again, like they're coming at you quickly, but also some of them are quite large, and you do have to be accurate. So if you do all that, you can solve. Sorry, you can beat that challenge by solving that problem, right? Just by finishing it out, like adding everything up. And then there's one where it's like, an old school sort of word problem, like the ridiculous ones you see in school. It's like, oh, well, Johnny had 15 apples and gave a third of them to this person and some more to this person. And it's like it's literal monkey business because there isn't an actual monkey in the problem and like a snake in the context of the story. And it's like, it's a ridiculous thing. And so it's just like these get at like math in some more direct ways, but the whole thing is like they have to do that, beat the Tamagami, and also beat the challenges to get the Dragon Ball, make their wish. And so we have that going. And then like as far as the plot is concerned, because this does tie into some interesting things, just like physically, mathematically. And just to be clear, I hate the idea, but I there's room to like figure some things out about it. It's like, so GT does a thing where it turns Goku into a kid, right? With the Dragon Balls. And that's the thing, and I hated it. It was fucking dumb then, and it's fucking dumb now. Um, and then Daima comes along, and it does the same thing, which is also fucking dumb. It makes Goku a kid, but it also makes everyone a kid, and it's like, this is horrible. This is dumb. Um, and I hate it. And it's one of those things where they're not actually becoming kids, right? They're just becoming miniature versions of themselves, pretty much, right? Like they're in kid bodies, but they do play around with that. You could debate whether that's noteworthy or not because they stopped mentioning it after a while and bringing it up sporadically. But there's a point where like Goku and Vegeta, in particular, are adjusting to their bodies. I guess like Piccolo too, to an extent, but like they're all adjusting to their smaller bodies again and what that means for their power and how they move. And it's like, but it doesn't impact the plot as much, but it's just kind of cool because you're like, well, if you are in a new body, right, and it's smaller and different than your current one, right, you're in that younger body. It's like, how do you adjust to that? Um, right? How do you account for distances and all that good stuff? Now Goku does something interesting where he goes out of his way to find a power pole and he uses that to kind of bridge the gap, as it were. And I think that was a genius move. And I like seeing the power pole. It's been too long, too damn long, and it is cool seeing it back in action. And so yeah. Anyway, so you have math in the fights, math in the flight, math in the power levels and power scaling, and but like just to be clear, um, you don't actually see power levels in Daima. Like you see them in Z and they kind of get abandoned, but like that idea is still there, like with power scaling. So you see that and you see the transformations and all that stuff. So I mean, we could talk about that too, right? Um, so yeah, you have math in the fights, math in the flight, math in the Dragon Balls, and like locating them, exploring, and all that. Because it's like, oh well, you have to fly in some of these cases, or maybe some cases you're in an area where it's not so easy to fly. Maybe it's easier to get a machine, and then you have to worry about like, oh well, how much gas or whatever or fuel do we have for that? Or what do we have to do to get a new ride? And like, how do we get to the next tier of the demon realm? And you got all that stuff going on. And then as far as like the power scaling goes, like I brought up power levels because I just like I have those things tied together because power levels or just power scaling or they allow for better power scaling right there too. It's like within universe they're introduced during the Z portion of the story, and they're useful in a degree because it gives you an idea where characters are at, and at the same time they're also subversive because right you have the scouters and they detect the power levels, but those power levels can be wrong because you don't have all the context, right? Like our fighters that we see in the series, they can hide their power levels, right? They can raise them in an instant, right? They have like expert level mastery of their key and can manipulate it really well, which it throws a lot of things with the scouter into question. But it is something that people grabbed onto. And with power scaling is like, well, we were doing that before, doing, and after power levels, and that doesn't stop with Dragon Ball Daima. But I will say it's very hard to scale during Dragon Ball Daima because it's like we don't know how much power was lost for our characters here. Like we don't even know how much power they gained after Boo because like it's one of those things like with Super. Like so Dragon Ball Daima is like super in one big regard is in that it takes place in between the Boo saga and the end of Z. Which is that is a frustrating thing. But there's so many things in Daima where it's like, okay, yeah, that clearly contradicts with the stuff that we see in Super, which of course contradicted with the stuff that we see in GT before. But the difference is, like Toriyama was barely involved in GT, just like the beginning stages, and not like writing or anything. He just did some character design and stuff like that. With Super, he was a lot more hands on, at least like in writing the movies that would lead to Super, like Battle of Gods and Resurrection of F. Sorry, Resurrection F. Those are the Dragon Ball Z movies, but like, if you saw Super, that those movies were turned into the first two arcs, and that Toriyama was communicating with everybody on how that story should go, and it developed a little differently in the manga and in anime. But I digress. My whole thing is just like Toriyama was more involved, way more involved with Super than he was GT, and he wrote like not only those Z movies that led into it, but the manuscripts that the anime for Super was based off of, as well as the manga. They just took different approaches on the material, but he also wrote the Super movies, so he's been way more involved than he used to be, and he wrote the story for Daima as well. But he's just like doing a different thing. So it's like it's a crazy thing too because there was a point where he's like, okay, well, Super's continuing the story of the manga, right? Like, when was that? Probably really early on during Super Bowl. My whole thing is like there's a whole bunch of contradictions, and if you start getting into canon stuff too much, it's a rabbit hole. Like I could see myself going down it now, but I bring up Super just to say like it doesn't go past the end of Z, and neither does Daima. And Daima is actually closer to the end of the Buu saga than the end of Z, whereas Super takes place kind of just all throughout that, right? And so we're at an interesting point, and it's like so we know the characters have gotten stronger, right? We see that throughout the series, because I know I said spoilers ahead earlier, but we see that Vegeta does unlock a Super Saiyan 3 transformation, and it's kind of crazy that we see that in his kid form first, just like we see Goku have a Super Saiyan 4 transformation in kid form first. Um, so we know these characters have gotten stronger. We just don't know how like much their bases have improved, right? But we can still see how they stack up to other characters. And yes, we're going to talk about those transformations. So like, we don't know like the power losses that they must have had when transforming into their smaller forms, right? But we do have some things to go on with the transformations. You take things at face value, right? So with the Daisenshi 7, like we get a lot of things with that. And so with the Super Saiyan transformation, right, it's a 50 times multiplier of the base, right? And that makes a lot of sense with what we see in the Frieza saga with like Frieza and Goku and where they're at power wise leading up to that point. So then after that, I think that's where it gets a little bit more nebulous personally, because like Super Saiyan 2 is like a 2 times multiplier of Super Saiyan, but a 100 times multiplier of the base. So it is a huge multiplier, but it's just like a 2 times multiplier of Super Saiyan. Ooh, well, what we see with Gohan is a special case, right? Because like he had a hidden power unlocked while he won Super Saiyan 2, so he's gotten like a crazy boost on top of everything. But in general, if we take that multiplier first value, we do have an actual multiplier. It's just like maybe not what you think. And then with Super Saiyan 3, it's like It's a 4 times multiplier of Super Saiyan 2, an 8 times multiplier of Super Saiyan, a 400 times multiplier of the base. And so, if we take everything at face value, like even if we don't know their base, we know like how far they're pushing it or could be pushing it when they do their transformations. And then Super Saiyan 4, you know, you're never really given a straight up multiplier for that. Like even when it was in GT, I guess like with GT, the idea is like, hey, it's taking a character and it's bringing out their potential. So it's like, in that regard, it's kind of like what happens to Gohan when he gets his powers unlocked, right? Except for he didn't. Except for like instant for like Goku, I guess like if Vegeta and GT, um, they get it through different means, but the idea is like they're supposed to pull out their power like that. Only you get the transformation with it too, right? Now in Daima, Goku has you know Super Saiyan transformation, and it's like I don't know how I feel about that. On one hand, right? Like I don't hate that they included it. It's just like it's not the kind of thing that I expected, you know. And I do like that the hair is red, just like the fur. I think that's dope. And with the hair and eye combination, it's like, hey, this is reminiscent of like Super Saiyan God in Super Saiyan 4. So it's like that is a different approach to it. Because I guess you could say like Gogeta had red hair, but like Goku and Vegeta didn't when they were Super Saiyan 4, but Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta did. Um, but anyway, I thought it was interesting that they made Goku's hair red with that. They also like he has like wider, you know, wrists and everything. They're more like ape like. So that was a funny touch. Like an interesting touch. Just like I got what they were going for. But yeah, so we don't know the multiplier in Daima, but we can assume that it's probably gonna be similar case to like GT where it's like this variable sort of multiplier. Like we don't know what it is, but we're drawing out the power of the user at any given moment, right? We're doing something with it. They're getting way more powerful. And so we see like Goku's Super Saiyan 4 transformation along with Vegeta's Super Saiyan 3 transformation. We see those transformations go on to their like go on in their kid form until like they're wished back to adult form. So it's like okay, so there's so many other things I can talk about with like math behind it, but I do want to talk about my feelings with Daima overall. Um, so Daima's an interesting case, right? Because like I really hated like some things in GT. Like GT wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. It's mediocre at best, and like some of their bad ideas made it into Daima. So it's like it's a weird thing because Toriyama, you could say that Daima is pretty much Toriyama's version of GT, and it's kind of fascinating to me, right? Because we see him, like Toriyama in the past and not too distant past, take material, um, and kind of run with it, right? It's kind of a funny thing because like Broly, for instance, right? Like he did the character designs for Broly, but Broly wasn't created by him, if that makes sense, right? Like we had someone else who created Broly, and like Toriyama, like for a lot of other movie villains, he did do like the designs, right? But he didn't necessarily create those characters. But those characters are based on his work. And so when you have something like Broly, you have a character that he did do the character design for, but he didn't create the character. But again, it was based off of his work. And then you get his take on that character. And so then you get something like Super Saiyan 4 and GT as a whole, stuff that like Toriyama didn't outright create. He did the character designs for like GT in the beginning, and he kind of just like bowed out. And, they did their thing, so he wasn't completely uninvolved in GT, right? But my whole thing is like it wasn't really like his stuff. Like he did some character designs early on and kind of let them have their way. But with Daima, it's kind of a weird beast because it's like fusing Toriyama's take on GT with his Demon Realm stuff. Because if you played the video game, whether we're talking about Heroes or if somehow you were actually one of the people that played Dragon Ball Online back in the day, because I think, and you would have had to been in like Japan or Korea, I think, like in South Korea or Japan. Um, so if you were one of those people that played Dragon Ball Online or you've played Dragon Ball Heroes, um, or you've played the Xenoverse games as they've gone on, or a lot of other video games just like in that realm. The demon realm stuff, right? You're not gonna be a stranger to that. And so like Toriyama brings a lot of the demon realm stuff into this. It's kind of a crazy thing because like in it's just like it's just so funny when you think about it, right? Because you have um Dragon Ball Daima where okay, everyone gets turned into kids, right? And then they go on a mission to well, I mean they rescued Dende partially, but the idea is like they're getting to Dragon Ball so they can wish themselves back. So they go on this exploration, right? They go on this adventure and they find themselves in the demon realm and crazy stuff happens and yes, Super Saiyan 4 becomes a thing in this particular realm, right? And then, so it's like it's the 40th anniversary of Dragon Ball, and you kind of have like that the roots of adventure, but Dragon Ball the roots lie in adventure, right? In the quest for the Dragon Balls, but it quickly becomes action oriented. Daima's no exception, and then the funny part is, if Daima is kind of like Toriyama's take on GT, that kind of does the same thing where it tries to recapture that same magic as Dragon Ball. It trying to goes, it tries to go back to the roots where it's hey, it's a big adventure, and in that case, it's the Black Star Dragon Balls, and they're exploring the universe in order to get those in time so the Earth doesn't blow up. Which it's a little bit more extreme than the early Dragon Ball stuff. But the idea is there's that sense of adventure, right? But then it does what? It goes to the action, and at first glance, it's like, well, hey, these series they're doing this thing where they try to go back to the roots of Dragon Ball, and then they end up being more like what you find in later Dragon Ball slash Dragon Ball Z, however you want to talk about that. But that's what Dragon Ball did. Like when you're looking at Dragon Ball, right? Whether you're watching Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z or just reading that whole Dragon Ball manga, there's the adventure stuff, but then it becomes more action oriented, less magical, less sci-fi. Um, no, and they bring a lot of magic back into the Demon Realm stuff. But my point is, right, like they actually end up being pretty like Dragon Ball in that regard, where it's like here you go from the adventure to the action, right? Um, but I think in both of their cases, you can't really ever go back. In the cases of both GT and Daima, you're dealing not with actual kids, but with adults in the body of kids. Like and it's just Goku in GT, and then it's like pretty much everyone in Daima. But the whole point is like they're not actually kids, and so you can't really go back in that regard. These characters are grown, and like people can say what they want about Goku, and they could say like, oh, he's immature, and he's pretty much been a kid all along. Like one, that would kind of defeat the point of having a kid's body, because it's well, if that's his mind state, shouldn't that be the point that matters, right? But in Goku's case, it's like I mean, he's not like a kid. He's very specific. But it'll argue that Goku is Goku. He's always going to be Goku to an extent, but he's also experienced growth over time, right? He hasn't been stagnant. Um, yeah. So, but I bring all that up is like you have a certain thing that both GT and Daima, were trying to do. With GT, it was kind of picking up the torch after Dragon Ball Z ended, but it's also worth noting that the Dragon Ball anime came out in 1986. The Dragon Ball GT anime came out in 1996, 10 years later. So on that 10th anniversary of the anime, they were trying to kind of bring it back to basics. But you really can't at that point. And Dragon Ball GT started like right after Z. So it's like, yeah, good luck. And then with like Daima, the last big Dragon Ball project, like in terms of animation, was Dragon Ball Superhero, before Dragon Ball Daima, and it's just like a 2 year or so difference, right? So Super at that point had like two movies. It had the anime, and it started appearing in more games, right? So and the manga was still going, or it still is going. Um, so it's still fresh in everyone's mind, and then you get the 40th anniversary of Dragon Ball, like the 40th anniversary of Dragon Ball overall, and it's like, well, what do we do? It's like, is Super going to continue someday? Are we going to get a Dragon Ball reboot? And we sort of do, but we don't, right? We get a continuation of the story, but for a different lens, and we kind of get them trying to take the roots back to early Dragon Ball, and so it's written by Toriyama, and it's just like I don't know how to feel about Taima. It's like on one hand, the animation is slick as hell. It's good. It's beautiful. It has this very surreal feeling to it. And I wanted to add for context that I watched Dragon Ball Daima after rewatching Dragon Ball and rewatching Dragon Ball Z. So like the standards were set very high, and it's like I tried to like keep that in mind while watching Daima, and like I already knew from the trailers that they were gonna get turned into kids, so I kind of braced myself for that. But I didn't expect Super Saiyan 4 Goku or Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. I didn't expect Gohan to get left out of the story again, especially after Superhero when he's brought back to prominence. So that kind of sucked. But overall, right? Like I feel like I would have had to like I enjoyed myself with Diamond, and it's like I would have had to, right? Like I watched it and I very much didn't hate my time with it. I thought it was a little slow to start, right? But I did like the action. I did like the fight choreography, and I did like how they explored some things in the demon realm. They explored a lot of things, added a lot to the lore. But it's kind of crazy because it's like, well, if you're trying to keep track of things, it's like Diamond isn't going to make sense with Super, and these are both things that are supposed to take place between the end of the Blue Saga and Z. So it's just like it's kind of you have to just kind of roll with it if you're looking at canon to a degree. Because some people could say like, oh well, just focus on the manga and all that. It's like I mean, but Toriyama has created other stuff, so it's like I feel like that has to count for something. But it's complicated, and the manga wasn't perfect in some regards with changes. There's a lot of retcons, and it's not like Toriyama didn't work on different projects over the years, where it's just like, oof, well, you gotta kind of ask yourself some things about that. So my whole thing is just like, don't get too caught up in canon. You could try, but it's like it won't end well. It never does. But yeah, so for Dragon Ball Daima, I did not think it was bad, but did I think it was good? I think it was different, and I think there was a lot about it that I liked and enjoyed. It was not what I expected from Dragon Ball in 2024/2025, but that's okay. It's not like Toriyama doesn't throw curveballs, or it's not like he didn't throw curveballs. So it's like it's kind of a crazy thing too, because like with Dragon Ball Daima, it would have been his like last work realistically, right? Like before he passed in 2024. So it's like, whoa. And so it's like Toriyama did get one more thing out there for Dragon Ball, whether you liked it or hated it, right? And for me, like I mostly liked it if I have to decide, right? It's different. With that being said, I'll see you in the next one.